I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
I'm Eli Sands.
Welcome to a Deep Cut Upkeep episode.
It's Scooby-Doo's favorite movie, RRR. Ree. Story, water, fire. Tag yourself.
I'm Fire. I want to be that intro. I want to be that beam intro. That's why I choose Fire.
Oh, dang.
I'm Tiger.
Hey, you can't pick the same. No, Ben, that's cheating.
Baby.
You can be Beam.
On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss that director's life and career to bring in context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
Before we get into our discussion of S.S. Rajamouli's RRR, please remember to subscribe to us where you listen to podcasts, because that's how you'll know when a new episode drops. Please leave a review for us on your podcast provider, because that helps more listeners get to the show. And you can keep up with us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod. Join us to talk about more movies on our Discord server. Well, not just movies, anything else. Come talk to us on our Discord server.
I found a cool looking rock and shared it on the Discord. Not
Yeah,
really.
share cool rocks with us. You can find links to all of those in the description. Okay, here we go. We covered S.S. Rajamouli's past 3 features with our special guest, Thanmai Lagudu. You can check out our episodes on the Bahubali series, in which we were introduced to Rajamouli's brand of powerful, punchy action filmmaking, always anchored in emotion, concerning characters whose story goals or life goals align with the goals of the whole world of the film. We also covered Rajamouli's previous outing before the Bahubalis, which was 2012's Iga, in which we marveled over the incredible performances of the film, especially Sudeep and Iga, as well as the believable and clever use of visual effects across all 3 of the features. And as we were covering those films last year, watching those films and talking about them on the podcast, a little monster film was brewing all over the world. And I know as we were covering it, Ben had already seen RRR and Thanmai had already seen RRR, so it was not so foreign to us. But during the time of our recording and releasing, RRR has slowly become one of the biggest action, like global action blockbusters of the year last year. And right now has ended up as probably, like, in my opinion, one of the most popular Indian films to come out of that country in years. Like I'm like thinking, I'm trying to think back to like when have I seen such like universal love for an Indian film, and I could say maybe like 3 Idiots, but that was just probably just Asian specific, like East Asian specific, its popularity. But it's sort of incomprehensible how popular RRR has become over the past few months. The choice not to have RRR be the foreign film nominee at this upcoming Academy Awards, which I think might have been a good choice after reading up a little bit more on the film, angered a lot of folks in the US and India, or like a lot of Rajamouli fans. US screenings of the film keep on happening with Rajamouli in attendance. They are seemingly trying to gun for some like big nods at the Oscars, like, foreign film aside. And Rajamouli is starting to become synonymous with top tier modern action filmmaking. Something that I sort of see akin to like the West's obsession with John Woo in the 90s. And I wouldn't be surprised if after Rajamouli makes his next globe-trotting like Indiana Jones epic, he might jump over jump over the pond to the US for an outing with some US stars. And today, we finally cover it. We cover what is now Rajamouli's most popular film. So if we were to do Deep Cut on Rajamouli right now, we would not cover the Bahubalis anymore, boo boo, and cover this film. And yeah, we're gonna talk about RRR. Let's do it, guys. Ben, I remember you being very hot on RRR during our previous recordings of our Rajamouli episodes, and I know you've rewatched it as well in the interim between these recordings. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the film, just general ideas.
So RR was my first introduction to Rajamouli, and the reason I saw it was because it was coming on IMAX, and I knew that Thanmai was really hot on the film at that time and really hot on Rajamouli. And I was like, okay, I got to check this out. So I kind of blindly went in, knew absolutely nothing as to what I was to expect.
Was
and
that before? That was before we decided to cover Rajamouli on the podcast?
Yeah, that was before. And so that was also really before I think the hype train for that thing really got kicking. Like, it was already kind of brewing, but not to a fever pitch yet. And I think maybe in the last 2 months, it got to that fever pitch. And so I think my experience of this was very much like a lot of people watching this for the first time, watching a Rajamouli for the first time, being not ready for the spectacle that was coming. This is like watching Avatar 1 for the first time. You know what I mean? Because you don't even know what to expect. So I think the thing that most wowed me, aside from extremely inventive and pushing the envelope in terms of how far an action scene can go before it gets to a point of unbelievability, is the emotional content of the story and how it's able to pack in within the action scenes emotional beats between the characters. At its very core, it's an extremely simple story, but told in a very, very effective way, using action and using music and using this very core relationship between the two main characters of Beam and Ram. So I really enjoyed it because of that. And it is so engaging because of how strongly those elements are tied together, the action and the emotion, that it sweeps you up into it. And that's kind of why it's become so universally loved. It's so easy to get swept up in it. And its story as well as its action. Like, I'm sure you have people who are just in it for the crazy action, as they might call it. And sure, that's like one valid way of looking at it. But going in for it because you are easily involved in emotion, that's kind of where I come in mostly. Like seeing the craft and seeing simple payoffs being kind of set up from the start of the film, and then like seeing how it carries through all the way throughout the film is, I think, quite masterful in the way he writes it and the way he structures the film and places these motifs within the film. It feels very much like very classic filmmaking, but in a realm of CG and modern action filmmaking.
Eli, you caught this very recently at a theater, which is very exciting. And you've held back from posting your thoughts and reviews on Letterboxd. So this is our first scoop. So give it to us, Eli. Give us the scoop.
I thought it was very good. I think I'm a little bit of a victim of having waited too long to watch it. Whereas for Ben, RRR was his introduction to Rajamouli. This comes months into my familiarity with Rajamouli, and I've come to appreciate the Bahubalis and Iga even more. For me, this doesn't quite reach the height of the emotional engagement that I felt with the Bahubalis, but I don't even really disagree with anything that Ben said. It is very classic, and there are excellent, very strong emotional beats, as well as super impressive filmmaking. It's all there. Just for me, I miss Actually, I'm not sure exactly what I miss from Bahubali. I'm trying to put my finger on that still. I think there's something that's in Bahubali that's not here for me. But I also hold it in the context of seeing it late in its run, seeing it on, frankly, a little bit of a subpar screen. I will not name the cinema where I watched it. And weirdly, I got a little dizzy partway through the screening. Boo-hoo.
Why?
I don't know. I think I didn't hydrate enough that day. This is the life of being a teacher.
Yeah, one of those R's is water.
Yeah.
You need water.
I don't know. I think I'm looking forward to hearing more about why it is for both of you, a 2 time in a row 5-star movie. Because for me, it's really good. It's a really good action movie. And then, of course, worth putting a hefty asterisk on the context that we're going to get into, that this is this seems to be very blatantly pro-Hindu nationalist at a moment when that is a troubling stance to take, both in the context of India and global trends towards nationalism, fascism, whatever term you want to say. I don't throw these around super lightly, and I also don't pretend to be perfectly informed. So
Yes. We're going to try our best to distill and just let you know what we know.
yeah, perfect. What about you, Wilson?
I feel similarly to Ben, even though I caught RRR. I was dying to see RRR as we were covering the Rajamoulis, and I sort of feel like I was doing RRR prep by watching and covering the other Rajamoulis for the podcast. So when I finally got to see it, albeit on my computer screen at home, I was shocked. I was in awe. I was taken aback. I think it was one of the most invigorating 2022 movies I saw that year. It was, I think, like faultless action filmmaking. Rajamouli here is sort of him crystallized, as opposed to Eli, who sort of saw the Bahubalis and Iga as something above RRR. I thought this is sort of Rajamouli at his most polished in his filmmaking sense. And I think we talk about clarity in storytelling, and I think Rajamouli does that so well, like was already doing that so well, but this feels so honed in and very laser focused, and I was so invested the whole time. And I guess it's the simple, like, portraying all the British except Dear Jenny as evil and horrible and the worst kind of people, and then sort of merging the Indian populace into these two historical figures and having them like fight for their nation is something that I, being living in Hong Kong, which was like a product of British colonialism, like I sort of got swept away as well into this, like, fuck our colonizers, let's kill them or like burn them to the ground, like. And I think showing the extremely despicable acts that the colonizers are doing to these people from the start of the film, that's sort of like, he doesn't tone it down. It's just like it always stays at that such high, like, evil level. It makes it so much more satisfying at the end when he sort of gets what's coming to him. Yeah, that's my short story that has become very long about my thoughts on RRR.
I will say though, Eli, that I think the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, this is a great movie. I gave it a 4-star rating at the time.
Oh, he's clearing the air right now.
So I thought about it for a little bit and asked myself, what more could I ask from this movie that it's not giving me? And that's how I changed my rating to 5 because it didn't feel like it was lacking anything in terms of what it was trying to do, in terms of what its intention was. And so, in a sense, the way that I look at films and the way that I rate films, not that rating is really an important part of the viewing experience, but I think it's always about matching the intention with the execution.
Totally.
And I think for this one, the intention was very clear in terms of the action filmmaking. And so I couldn't possibly think of how else he could have changed anything to improve that part of that action filmmaking.
Yeah. It's really hard to fault.
Although
Yeah.
I will say that thinking about Bahubali, I think Bahubali 1 is fairly weak because it feels like an act 1 of a story. But Bahubali 2 is just pure act 2, which makes it really feel like a full package kind of thing. I would still say RRR is probably my favorite Rajamouli movie, but Bahubali has a much more intricate plot that we kind of call Shakespearean, more kind of,
Yeah.
what's the word?
Elaborate, perhaps?
More of that palace intrigue. Yeah, labyrinthine. Like that stuff is very fun and very engaging. Whereas RR is quite simple
Yes,
with those
yes.
kind of relationships.
That might be it.
And I think the complex characters in Bahubali, I so appreciate the female characters in Bahubali and
Yeah.
their arcs, at least most of them. And I think sort of understanding more from the villain side and having that be relayed to us as something that like, oh, I see why you want to do these things to our heroes, to Bahubali.
Yeah.
It becomes a more balanced kind of film, whereas RRR is just like, as Ben said, super simple in its storytelling and plot construction.
But how well executed is that simplicity is kind of how I look at it,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a 3-hour movie, but if you really just split up its components, it doesn't have that many sequences. Right? Each sequence is just a really long, well-executed sequence. And then the way that the relationship between the two main characters develops happens in quite few parts, in a sense, even though it's a long movie. But then within each part is like a nested sequence of events to push that part of narrative. It's kind of how I see the whole picture.
Yeah.
It's just a very clean movie in its construction. It just makes sense. Like the way
Yeah.
the intermission hits and what information you get before and after the intermission, it just makes sense and it's so well executed and well planned and structured. Repeating myself, but yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay, also if you're tuning in and you haven't seen this film, I think we are bound to get into spoiler territory when talking about the movie. So if you don't want to spoil the movie for yourself, I suggest that you go watch the movie now and then come back and listen to us talk about it.
See you in 3 hours.
Yeah, see you in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Netflix has it in Hindi. I would suggest you try to find a Telugu copy of it because
I mean, I watched it in Hindi and it was fine. It wasn't it was fine. Yeah, but if you can,
it's
if you
that,
can,
but it's also I think trying to support South Indian filmmaking in the means that it was
Yeah.
intended to be seen, and not sort of resorting to the dub of the national language to see the film. Let's dive into some context first. I'm gonna tear through the production context and then talk a little bit more about the politics before we talk about the film. So the story was once again co-written by Rajamouli's father, V. Vijayendra Prasad, and it is a fictitious story or a historical fantasy bringing together two famous Indian revolutionaries, Alluri Sitarama Raju and Komaram Bhim, who fought against the British Raj and the Nizam of Hyderabad, respectively. So they were never really in the same location, so there was no way that they could have worked together like they do in RRR. So Rajamouli is sort of imagining this world where these two historical figures have come together to basically fight against the British Raj. The film was officially announced in 2018 as RRR, and as we know, RRR in the film stands for Rise, Revolt, and Roar.
Roar.
I think
But-
roar is the second R.
Oh, Rise, Roar,
Revolt.
and Revolt. Whoops.
Yeah, you can't revolt without roaring first.
That's right.
But actually, it was marketed as RRR because it was the first time that all three of these famous R's have been working together. So that's Rajamouli, Ram Charan, and Junior NTR, who's also known as Rama Rao. So Ram Charan and Rama Rao are incredibly famous South Indian actors who come from families of stars, of filmmaking stars. And Ram Charan and Rama Rao have never been in a film together. And this is sort of
Damn.
like Rajamouli bringing together the biggest crossover in Indian film history or film history. That's why there was so much hype going into this film by people who know of these stars. And these stars have cultish fandoms like all big stars should. The lead up to the film, at least in South India or in India, was sort of deafening.
I think when you watch this film, you understand why they are stars.
Oh, totally. The charisma is off the charts.
It is unreal. And I think it's not just about how good they are, but also just pure commitment on like every level. And they can do everything. They can sing, they can dance, they can act. And they are
Stunts.
their screen presence is just off the charts. And you just want to look at them, and it's like this total package kind of thing that I don't know if necessarily you can really compare them to any Hollywood stars at the moment that can do this kind of like everything kind of deal.
Yeah.
Like the only thing I can think of is like a Tom Cruise, but he doesn't dance
Yes.
or sing.
Well, they
So I'm
don't.
just like-
They don't really sing. They have playback singers.
Okay, sure. But the performance is like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just such a total package that they're able to come on screen.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And the way they command the screen is also, quite astounding. Rajamouli worked on this film with a lot of the same crew as the Bahubalis and Iga, including his cinematographer, KK Senthil Kumar, and his composer, MM Kiravani. He also worked with Makuta VFX, again, who we shouted out in the past episodes on Rajamouli for the visual effects. Last thing I'm gonna say, this movie made a bunch of money. It grossed 175 million worldwide. It set several box office records for an Indian film worldwide, including placing itself as the third highest grossing Indian film and the second highest grossing Telugu film worldwide. Don't ask me what the other films are in this list because I do not know.
I want to know. Hey, Wilson, what are the other two films on this list?
Oh, God. I don't know.
I'm going to guess one is...
It might be another Rajamouli film.
Bahubali.
Oh, no, I'm
it
wrong.
wouldn't. It
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah,
surprise.
Bahubali is the second highest grossing Indian film worldwide, and the top one is Dangal. Although it looks like RRR
Dangal's
is
really
number
good.
4 right now.
Okay.
KGF
So
Chapter 2 is the third highest
overtook it.
grossing.
Okay. Wow. But I think the conversation, at least in America, everyone's sort of come around to support this film. And here is why we need to talk about the film's politics and Indian politics in general, because I think that was the issue that our dear friend and special guest Thamai had with the discourse surrounding this film, and is probably a big reason why he is not with us today. If you are listening to this, Thamai, we send our love.
We love you.
We love you. And our thanks. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I got all this information from article by Ritesh Babu, which I'm gonna link in the description. And it's a very long article that sort of chronicles the history of Indian politics, the history of South Indian cinema, and then finally covering RRR. So I'm sort of going to boil it down to the most important stuff that we need to cover. So if you don't know, right now, India is being governed by Narendra Modi, who is a right-wing leader, and he's leading a right-wing government. So you could draw a lot of parallels to Donald Trump's rule over the U.S. in the past few years, and him being in power has sort of validated a lot of right-wing groups and fascist groups. For example, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, which Babu writes as an evil Hindu nationalist organization, which has been there for a long time and takes a lot of cues from European fascism. And alongside that, the idea of Hindutva, this obsession with Hindu nationalism, which rings similar to the idea of Lebensraum that Nazis had during pre-World War II, the wish to create a fully Hindu state. And this is an idea that was serving mainly upper caste Hindus at the time. And this, in turn, has allowed for a lot of anti-Muslim hate and anti-Muslim mobs and protests that have sparked all across India. Yeah, not very good stuff. South Indian cinema have had also a history of adapting historical epics onto the screen. The Mahabharata and these figures of Ram in the Ramayana have been synonymous with popular South Indian filmmaking, and in turn, the right-wing nationalists of India have started to claim Ram, which in the story of the Ramayana is avatar of Vishnu, who's the god of preservation, and Ram is seen as special, as godlike, as like sort of the ideal man and ruler and king and hero. He is the perfect man to marry. And they've sort of claimed Ram as an idol or an image of their right-wing ideology. And this can be seen by the way that they chant his name at anti-Muslim rallies, the way that they sort of use that to echo this idea of Hindu supremacy. And the history of the Mughals in India is also being used as a way to push Muslims out of the country, claiming them as foreigners or invaders, and the Hindu people as being oppressed and the underdogs, whereas in reality it is very, very different. The film industry cannot be divorced from this. It is so intrinsically tied to this, as it is in many different countries. Like, film is seen as propaganda. I was reading this article by Wang Bing about the state of Chinese cinema, and
Yeah, good article.
one of the big points that he said was that Chinese population, they can't divorce this idea of going to a cinema and being indoctrinated by propaganda. And with this current right-wing government, it is quite similar. I think Modi has been meeting with producers, with directors, to sort of form a film industry that includes Bollywood, Tollywood, all the different regions, to come together to aid in this idea of nation building. And I think RRR fits very cleanly into that, especially at the end where Ram Charan sort of embodies the avatar Ram by the end in his garb and in his arrows. To end this, I'm going to quote one of Babu's paragraphs towards the end of his write-up on RRR. He says, Rajamouli can duck flak all he likes. say the film isn't about patriotism or anything else beyond friendship. And his diehard fans can insist that what he's doing is entirely fair and nothing objectionable. But the writing is on the wall. The math is clear. This isn't progress. It's regressive status quo maintaining upper caste Hindu fantasy set in the pre-independence era India. As much as I can respect its contempt for the white man and his evil empire forged in imperialist ideology, as much as I enjoy a good fuck the colonizers tale, it's not enough for me to ever be able to overlook these things. And I think that is a sentiment echoed by a lot of people who've seen the film, including Thamai, and I would like to just address this before we get into basically raving about this movie, because it is sort of inviting a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric, and even though that doesn't have to be the intention by Rajamouli, it's hard to deny that it is actually happening. And people in the West openly supporting this film is also bringing some validation to these right-wing nationalist folks in India, validating them and their cause. So I just wanted to put it out there first to say that this is what's happening surrounding the film. Films don't exist in a vacuum. I don't think we should ever talk about films like that. We always should be considering the context surrounding movies and whether movies do good in the world or contribute to not so good things. So there we have it. And I think there's more things, especially with the portrayal of Bheem, who historically has come from a ethnic minority group in India, portrayed by Junior NTR, who is a upper caste Hindu. That also becomes very iffy as well, donning Muslim garb as not like genuinely donning in Muslim garb, but using it as a disguise.
I think reading these articles, the thing that most troubles me is the way that Rajamouli takes these two historical characters and then creates this fictionalized story around it. And he's not the first person to do that. But when you do that, you run into issues when you change the history for certain goals in your storytelling. And there are definitely instances where it feels like those goals are to further a sort of Hindu nationalistic / Hindu superiority kind of messaging. And the thing that most troubles me is the way that the character of Komaram Bheem is diminished to heighten the respect that you're supposed to have for the character of Ram. And that is probably the most troubling thing, because
like, look at the end of the film as well.
So the way that Bheem is kind of portrayed as a simpleton, I'm reading from this Vox article.
Illiterate.
Yeah, and illiterate. And he was not illiterate. And in a sense, becoming this character who at the opening of the film is this heroic character and then slowly becomes a character that asks guidance from the character of Ram. And if you think of them as symbols of, for Bheem, he's a symbol of the Gandhi people, and then for Ram, he's a symbol of like the larger Hindu identity. Then it's kind of saying that this minority Gandhi people want to subsume themselves to the education from a Hindu perspective.
Yeah.
And that's obviously very problematic. And I think most obviously and emblematically problematic is in the final sequence, there's this slogan that Ram shows to Bheem or teaches Bheem, which is Jal Jangal Zameen, which is translated to water forest land, which is a slogan that came from Komaram Bheem and now taken as being taught from Ram to Bheem, which is not just, which is obviously problematic in the way that it's co-opting the rebellion that comes from the Gandhi minority to a larger Hindu rebellion against just the colonizers. And Rajamouli sets the film in a part of their lives which is earlier than the rebellion that the people are supposed to know from these two people, these two real people. So he's trying to like create a new origin story for real people, which if they were just, you know, comic book characters, no one's gonna care, but they're not. And I think that's the thing that really problematizes the film and the context that it's in. And I think Rajamouli really is just using them as superhero type characters and then kind of changing an origin story, which is fine if they're fictional, but when they're real, it has real world impact, like you were talking about, Wilson, where it validates the current narrative of Hindu nationalism, but ignores the real context that both of these revolutionaries had, which was separate because they were not known to have met in that time.
Yeah.
So he kind of commingles all these narratives to support one narrative, and I can definitely see how that is problematic and is an act of reduction and an act of reducing the complexity of what happens in India, where India is full of so many different kinds of people, you know, so many different languages, so many different communities, and trying to kind of put them all together and just say that, oh, you know, it's one Hindu nation. That is diminishing in so many ways. And this is like one very large diminishing in a very popular, not just in a very popular medium and in a very popular film.
Not to like, pit oranges and apples against each other, right? But the only other Indian filmmaker that we've covered on this podcast, Mani Ratnam, I think is super conscious of this, and when making films is ever conscious of these things that divide Indian society, and with Bombay and even Dil Se, and like just injecting a little bit of complexity or just talking about people's differences, and not trying to just rid away of it so cleanly as Rajamouli does is something that I might have wished, but maybe that might have taken away from the forward charging power of RRR. But like as Ben said, like why use real historical figures in the first place when this problem could have been avoided from the get-go?
I think the issue is that with RRR, it is a problem, but it's extremely subtle in some ways. Like for a global audience, all these things, this historical stuff, like you're not going to know about this. I didn't know about this watching this for the first time. And so I could just take in the movie as these two characters rather than these two characters based on real people.
Right.
And if they were just fictional characters, then obviously these issues would be less apparent because neither of these characters are Muslim characters, right? And so that religious complication is not there. And so in a way, Rajamouli uses these symbols because he's trying to reach a wider Indian audience. And that's really a commercial/business proposition. And I don't really have an opinion on that right now, but you can see that he's using the images, very popular nationalist images, to kind of inject the story with a more broad Indian appeal.
Hindu-centric Indian appeal.
Yeah, exactly. So like obviously that caters to the majority peoples rather than to a minority people. So with Mani Ratnam, he's using the cinema to make a point. Rajamouli is not necessarily making a point.
No,
he's just
making
using what is popular. Yeah, he's just making a movie. He just wants people to watch it. So he'll use any means necessary to make this thing work for as many people as possible.
But if that were the case, he wouldn't have to wind up reinforcing a sense of hierarchy or caste. As we've noted, there are a lot of moments in the story when Beam is saying things like, me being just a tribal, I didn't know the truth of what Ram was trying to do. There's Beam asking Ram in the end to teach him how to read and write. There's the imagery that the movie is, I think, cognizantly playing with, of Ram donning the garb of Ram and wearing saffron orange. I don't know. I think if we go back to the thread that Wilson was tying to Mani Ratnam and Bombay, that also is attempting to reach a wide audience, but in a more egalitarian sense of saying both Hindus and Muslims that are on either side of this real conflict that happened, let's come together. And whether it's the right message to have in the aftermath of that particular riot that Ratnam is building on, he's saying, let's put aside differences and heal. But what Rajamouli seems to be doing here, especially as the movie reaches its final minutes, and I'm including that final credits dance sequence, he seems to be saying, come under the umbrella of Hindu nationalism and let's be one nation built on these particular ideals and identifiers.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It feels ickier than just trying to reach as wide an audience as possible to me. It feels like reaching a wide audience with something under the surface to be swallowed. And also worth mentioning that this is something that American film does all the time.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And should be discussed more in the way that it's being discussed with RRR. There's so much insidious racial and class and colonial messaging in American popular cinema that goes way under discussed. And as opposed to the article from Wang Bing that Wilson mentioned, where Wang is saying that Chinese audiences bear a certain skepticism towards cinema, there's none of that skepticism in American popular audiences. These things just get swallowed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about
Likely.
Top Gun Maverick of last year.
Top Gun Maverick. Yeah.
Showing in the same theater where I saw RRR last night.
Why would you watch Top Gun there? And so that similarly is about, American military industrial complex and about how awesome it is.
It is already like toned down, right? Like they have an unnamed villain country. There's like, it is more like compared to like 90s and 80s military action films, like it is already toned down, but it's still like advertising the military industrial complex, and God knows how many people signed up for the fucking Navy, the Army, the Air Force after seeing this. Like it's propaganda.
I think the thing about these two films is that they don't say it very clearly. They don't say it out loud, like in text. It's all in visuals.
Yeah.
Like how cool this thing is or how much you want to buy into. It's all in visuals and all embedded within an emotional relationship that has nothing to do with that subtext.
And the vest of righteousness. Anti-colonialism is a righteous cause.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's something that even the colonizers can get behind.
Like fighting terrorism, generic terrorism is also great. You know what I mean? So it's like, obviously it's very problematic, but it's kind of like, I don't say it as lightly, but it is proof of how strong the filmmaking is. That the messaging is so deeply embedded within the storytelling.
Yes. But that's
see what
why
you mean.
I feel like Rajamouli needs to be careful. Like he can't just I don't
exactly.
think that it's okay to just like throw around stuff
Of
like
course.
that. Especially when you are making movies that are so invigorating and like sort of feel like calls to action. It becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
For a global audience outside of India, your enjoyment of this film won't necessarily say that you agree or subscribe to those ideas because you don't have the context
Of course.
to what's going on.
Of course.
And it's very difficult to kind of draw a line between your enjoyment of it to the problematic aspects of the film. But I think the most important thing is that if you enjoy this film, that you know what is the issues that it has.
Yeah.
Because yes, it's a very competent action movie, extremely competent action movie. And you can enjoy it as just that, an action movie. But I think it's a good chance to also kind of dig into and learn about what's happening in India and to give yourself that education.
Yeah.
That will probably diminish your total enjoyment of the film, but will give you some, will tell you more about what's happening around the world. And it's very similar to what's happening in a lot of places around the world.
Yeah.
It's just a different context,
Yep.
honestly.
Scary, scary. Yeah. It's like Wolf Warrior. Wolf Warrior is trash filmmaking, sorry.
All right, it's 55 minutes. Should we
Okay,
talk
shit.
about the movie?
Yeah, let's talk about that damn movie, man.
Here's what you came for.
Yeah, sorry to No, I'm not apologizing. I'm not apologizing.
If you can't sit through 50 minutes of political discussion about RRR, then you don't deserve our conversation about the form.
That's true. And here we go. This fucking film is magnificent, right? From the introductions of our characters to them getting to know each other and not knowing that both of them are working on different sides, to the betrayal, to the pre-interval action sequence at the palace where Beam releases all the animals, to
Party animals.
yeah, to the reveal of Ram's backstory and why he's working for the British Raj, why he's fighting for them, to that ending. I didn't even fully watch this film to prepare for this recording. The last time I saw this film was over the summer at IFC Center in a similarly very tiny screen. But this sequence of events, these action beats and action moments are staying in my mind. This is like, I can say that more than the Bahubali action sequences. Like, even though they still, like, I still see them in my mind, I think the progression of events in RRR, like, are still so clear to me, and I'm able to, like, recount the progression of events that happen in the film. And I think that just speaks to how tight the script is and how bold each action sequence is, and musical sequence as well, like the Natu Natu and
Oh, man.
everything.
That is a all-timer sequence.
Yeah, where do we go first?
I'll-
Let's talk about Natu Natu.
I don't know what else there is to say besides just watch this and be like, that's great. And then be like, okay. I mean, the dancing in that one, the suspender part where they look like they're floating and like sliding from left to right, is just great.
So impressive.
Yeah, that's just great choreography and then rooted in character as well. It's about anti-colonialist sentiment, about bro friendship, and also about being a wingman to your bro. Like, what the heck? There's like a lot of things going on in that scene. It's not just a dance sequence, you know what I mean? There's like
Yeah.
a lot of things going on that advance the story within the dance sequence, which speaks to how like every sequence has multiple purposes. It's not just the pure enjoyment of the scene. It's the pure enjoyment of the scene plus character development plus narrative advancement. That's every scene. I think about the introduction to Beam when he captures a tiger. The first time I watched it, I was like, oh damn, they're gonna eat a tiger. That's wild, but okay. So they catch a tiger. First of all, great opening scene to introduce a character. Right? Completely epic. But then you find out why they caught a tiger in the pre-intermission action sequence where they release a tiger plus many, many other animals into the British colonial compound to fight them, which I was like, what? I did not expect that, but it was set up for me, and he did give me a clue, and I just could not possibly have connected the dots from that to that. But those kinds of motifs like really work for me.
Yeah.
In how it kind of builds this cohesive, coherent story. Another one I love is what I call the Megazord sequence, which is when Beam rescues Ram, and Ram's legs are not working anymore because he's been beaten and tortured. So then he climbs onto Beam's back. So Beam becomes the legs and Ram becomes the arms. And they do this tandem action sequence.
That's
That
just
is
so smart.
Smart, inventive, but also a kind of conclusive kind of sequence to solidify their alliance and how they complement each other's abilities. Because in the very first bro friendship sequence, after they save that kid in that first rescue sequence,
Oh, yeah.
you see in that opening song / like, I think it's like maybe credits or something, I'm not sure, where they're like becoming friends and like doing a lot of stuff together, walking in the countryside, walking along the railway. And you see that one of them is better in arms and one of them is better in legs. And that's what happens in that final sequence where they put themselves together in this Megazord thing.
Megazord. A moment that I found so emotional and like sort of the call to arms scene is the scene where like the public torturing of Beam in front of the big crowd, and the crowd revolting and Beam singing that song. And well, I'm used to like turning an emotional moment into a musical number to intensify those emotions. So it's not something that's like novel to me. Like I'm not one of those reviewers.
Wilson does it all the time. He turns emotional moments into musical numbers in his day-to-day life.
Exactly. Catch me singing on, I don't know, the subway. I thought that was one of the strongest moments in the film. I think the imagery there of the blood like dripping down and sort of like causing this wave of anger towards a governing body that is unrightfully torturing this man. I think a lot of the things in this movie like make me just want to like fight something or like do something. That's why I think it's so dangerous, but it's like it's so it does feel like a call to arms, especially that moment where it's like, yes, everyone else is getting in on this anger towards them, but also I as an audience member like feel your pain so deeply, and you're astounded at your perseverance and like your inhuman strength to overcome all these lashes. I felt incredibly moved by that moment, and that was sort of the pathos that kept me going, at least for Beam's character, till the end of the film.
Not to kind of pull us back into the political argument too much, but yes, I know there's this problem that the way that the film ends like kind of puts Beam below Ram in a sense. But within the way that the film treats their relationship, there is a push and pull between both of them where they both believe that the other has the more noble cause. And I think that part is very emotionally engaging, where they both sacrifice what they think is what they want for what the other was doing.
Yeah.
Of course, the way it ends is a different story, I think. But then within that experience, you have... When you first meet Ram, you don't even know he's the good guy. He just seems like a weird guy that has completely co-opted the colonizer perspective, right?
Yeah. Super soldier.
Until you find out why he's there as kind of an undercover operative.
Yeah.
But then when he finds out and sees the power of Beam's kind of rebellion in that scene you're talking about, Wilson, then he realizes the folly of his own actions, and then he decides that he wants to follow the way that Beam is doing things in terms of fighting the colonizers. And then it gets turned around again, where when Beam learns what Ram is doing, the reason he looks like he's on the colonizer side, and he decides that, he wants to help Raju instead.
Yeah.
And I think that ping pong between those two allegiances is very engaging to watch, because you get to see them become friends, fall apart, and then bite into each other again. And that relationship is so strong. The way that they portray their alliance and the way the alliance shifts and then is reinforced is so emotionally engaging and embedded within all the action scenes and all these musical sequences that it's just so easily engaging.
Yeah. And it reinforces what is already a really strong bond between the two that's established in the start, and sort of does what Rajamouli does best. And well, I think one of the things that he does really well is these post interval reveals that expand our knowledge on these characters and explain why they're doing what they're doing, much like the payoffs that we get in the second Bahubali film as well. You're like, why would Katapa kill Bahubali? It will be all revealed.
Why would he?
In part 2. Why would he? We'll see. Honestly, okay, I feel like a lot of people have only seen RRR and haven't seen the deep cuts. So this is also an opportunity to be like, his other films are also really, really, really good. And you should check those out as well.
Eli thinks they're better.
Yeah, Eli does think they're better, even if Ben and I think that this is the best. And Ram Charan gives a really, really great performance in Magadira as this reincarnated lover. So good.
Eli, are there any things that worked for you in this? Because you haven't really mentioned
a lot
any.
of things. I think even most of the things that you guys are listing worked for me. I thought it was really good. Just it doesn't reach the heights of the Bahubalis for me.
Is it because you're white? So sorry, Eli. Sorry. Just joking.
Yeah.
You can cut it. It can cut it. The joke.
No, keep it in. Keep it in.
I want that girl on my mantelpiece.
I was thinking about the characterization of the British, and at my first glance, I think, I thought the British are portrayed pretty one-dimensionally, but there's something about the way that this movie portrays the decorum of the British as both silly and providing a thin veneer over the cruelty of the empire that I thought was actually a compelling characterization of the villain here.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I fully do not buy the wife actress who's got so much plastic surgery. It took me entirely out. Entirely out. The
Not
governor's
historically
wife.
accurate.
But it was wild when she was calling for more blood out of Beam in the public whipping scene, and then pulls out this nail-studded black leather whip that she throws to Ram's feet. Wild. And I think that making overt and not subtle the evil of a colonial empire makes sense. And as Ben's saying, it's part of the movie's goals and it's achieving it.
Yeah. And also, as someone who has been exposed to quite a lot of poor white people acting in Hong Kong cinema, like this is really not bad. Like
It's
quite
okay.
It's pretty bad.
It's okay. Like,
well, I've seen the bottom of the
Jenny needs to
barrel.
tone
but-
it down.
Yeah. Well, do you know that Jenny could have been played by Daisy Edgar Jones, who is in Normal People?
Yeah.
So she was gonna be Jenny, but then dropped out due to scheduling conflicts. So it could have been
That's
her.
crazy.
Yeah.
He said she's in Where the Crawdads Sing.
That's a mistake. You done goofed.
Yeah, but Jenny, is it time to talk about the big white woman in the room? Oh, she's not big, but I'm trying to do like the elephant in the room. Sorry.
There are already elephants in the film. Wait, are there? Are there?
There's a toy
No, there
elephant that gets given to Malay.
Elephants in PS1.
Elephant in
And in
Bahubali
Bahubali
2.
too.
Yeah.
Oh, great sequence.
But yes, the white woman of it all, Jenny.
I mean, I just feel like her performance is just a little... It's just not genuine in a way that doesn't work.
Genuine.
But in a way, because the rest of the white people are these caricatures, it kind of is fine. Like, this is like in the tradition of bad white people acting in Asian movies.
Yes.
Like, it's in that tradition, and you kind of like forget about it. You're like, okay, this is just how it is. Like, this is how white people actually are in these movies. Like, this is their
just
real
how white
way
people
of...
are in real life.
So you're just like, okay, that's how it is. But, it's serviceable. It's fine. It
Yeah, it's
gets
fine.
the thing moving. It's okay. Like, it's not enough for me to dock off a star. You know what I mean?
And it makes the leads look all the better, too.
Yeah. Remember
That's true.
Lagan, Ben? Do you remember watching
Yeah.
Lagan and the white people? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was also
Forget
pretty
about
funny.
that. I can't remember.
Oh, that's a damn good movie as well. I think
That's a great movie,
fucking
yeah,
great movie.
that's
That's like an anti-colonial movie as well.
Yeah.
Jenny being the only good white person in this compound full of white people. And it's not believable, this like infatuation that I just don't that's the one thing that I really push back against in this film. I'm like, I don't believe this infatuation that Beam has, this simpleton. I feel like that sort of belittles him even more, like the way that he talks about how sophisticated she is. It's like I don't know I was not into that romance
Yeah.
There's a bit of
all.
romance between Raju and Beam in this film.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it just eclipses anything you could possibly try to do aside from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, okay.
I want to know, do you guys have a favorite beat in the movie? A favorite moment?
Ooh.
Do you, Eli?
Not off the top of my head, but maybe in the pre-interval sequence when the truck full of animals stops and Beam launches out of the cages and there's that
Yeah.
incredible tableau shot of all the
Yeah.
animals and Beam in the air. That feels
Yeah.
like a moment of the distillation of the power of the movie.
Yeah, another great example of really like solid VFX work as well. That is
Really good
very
VFX animals.
integrated with the live
Yeah.
action elements. Yeah. Rivaling that of Avatar, dare I say.
Ooh. I mean, I've already mentioned like the Megazord scene. I mean, the animals launching out, that is just incredibly creative and random, but works.
Yes.
I was just scrubbing through the film last night on Netflix, and when Raju and Beam show down in that scene, and then he kind of pushes this motif of fire versus water.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
And then Beam has all these hoses just flinging around. And I'm like, is this practical or not? I have no idea. And then Raju has this huge flaming torch that he
Yeah.
holds, like he uses to punch people. And it's just this flaming hot coals
yeah.
on like,
Like gauntlets.
And you're like, what is this? It's just really extreme in terms of like how he pushes that motif. You know, it's not subtle. And then in the final fight sequence, you have Beam coming out of the water. That's also like a great sequence.
Beam
and
swinging
a
the
great image.
motorbike.
Yeah.
Is
Oh man, that's a
fantastic.
great moment. And I love the creativity of how they in general repurpose the weaponry of the British Empire to fight against British soldiers.
Like the use
Super
of the
creative.
arrows and like the grenades, right? If I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The action ideas, like you can talk about the way that we film action sequences. I feel like a lot of talk about action is about how things look, editing, shot choices, rhythm, movement. But this is really about inventiveness, which we talked about in Bahubali, and like how inventive the solutions are to the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I'm
feel
thinking
it's
about
like-
the carpets flying over the.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So this like
man.
minute to minute inventiveness. It's not just about how cool it looks, but how cool the idea is. It's always about how cool the idea is.
And it just shows Rajamouli working in different scales of action as well, like small scale action and then big fights. And yeah, it's impressive how he's able to come up with so many visual ideas and action ideas
yeah.
in every minute basically. I love Ramcharan getting so pissed off when he's training that he punches a hole in the punching bag. It's just like a gunshot. Pa!
Also, Ramchard is like, he's like 100% man.
So
like-
attractive.
Yeah. Step on me, spit on me.
Like, it's
I don't
ridiculous.
care. Do anything to me.
It's actually insane. Like he has like $1 million smile.
Both of them, Junior NTR
Yeah.
as well.
He's also very charming. Like he feels like you know him, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like that's the power of these two stars.
They have a strong friendship. Because they're both strong.
Oh, nice. Nice one.
Oh yeah, what is he doing next?
Yeah, Rajamouli says that the next film that he's going to do is sort of like a globe-trotting adventure akin to Indiana Jones,
Damn.
something like that.
I'm here for it.
He's already starting to work on it in between doing his Oscar campaigning. I think this film has good chances of showing up at the Oscars for
Yeah.
some of the categories.
Something, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're really putting a lot of money and effort behind the Oscar campaigning that I think it's not going to be a surprise if it happens.
My guess is it gets maybe a nom for Best Picture, but definitely a nomination for Best Director. Chance that he wins. And if he does, I think that heralds in a new wave of action in America that looks a lot like Rajamouli's style.
Honestly, I think that might be the injection or like the kick in the ass that American action filmmakers need. Not saying like, I don't know, Cameron or Kaczynski need that kind of kick in the ass, but well, we can talk about this more in our 2022 episode, but I think people are starting to realize the staleness of our superhero filmmaking.
I mean, if the superhero movies can have this kind of inventiveness.
Yeah, and also that emotional charge to it. And that it's not even just in the action filmmaking, but in its storytelling and its character building. There's a lot to learn from the way that Rajamouli constructs his characters and has audience align with them. That I think a lot of these like superhero franchise production companies like Marvel and DC should take note of. Not say that they hire him. Don't do that. Don't do that. Please don't do that.
We basically have the superhero pool of action, which is the largest. We have the David Leitch, John Wick inspired pool of action, which is a little bit smaller. And then we have a couple of actually masterfully done things in the vein of like Cameron or Kaczynski.
But those are like the big budget,
Macquarie.
like really, really big budget stuff. And
Yeah.
like the John Wick stuff is the more mid-budget stuff,
Yeah.
I think. And there's like no in-between, of course. And
No.
I think it's tough. It's really not about budgets. It's really about storytelling, as you said, Wilson. It's all about storytelling. It's about inventiveness. And sometimes it's hard to replicate that. It's not easy.
No.
That just requires talent and creativity. And if you don't have it, if the film doesn't have it, it's not going to work. No matter how crazy or bonkers, quote unquote, you make the action, without that secret sauce, it doesn't get to those heights.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. Please rate and review because that helps us keep making the show. Be sure to subscribe to us where you listen to podcasts so you'll know when our next episode drops. Keep up with Deep Cut on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod. Join us to talk about movies on our Discord server, to which you'll find links in the description. Thank you to Justina Yam for our beautiful artwork. I'm Wilson.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli.
Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.
Not to.